Welcome back to another episode of the YeahDat podcast, hosted by yours truly, West Coast Robbie. How y'all doing out there? I'm doing well. I hope y'all are doing well. How was y'all's weekend? I hope y'all had a good weekend. My weekend was eventful, so I took off work to go out of town, but we'll get into that. Before we start, make sure you rate the podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. If you're on Spotify, give it the 5 stars. If you're on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, make sure it's 5 stars. Leave a comment, like it, follow, etc., etc. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, make sure you do your due diligence and you help the homie out. Yeah, that. Last episode, episode 58, we talked NBA All-Star Weekend, the shenanigans behind it, how terrible it was, as well as a few other things like dealing with Karens, a real life Karen situation, the whole nine. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure you go back, listen to that on all podcast platforms. And we are here with episode 59. If you're new to the show, welcome. For all my returning listeners, my OGs, you already know what it is. I love y'all for it. Appreciate the support. Make sure you follow on all podcast platforms as well as on social medias platforms. Instagram at YeahDat Podcast, TikTok at YeahDat Podcast, X, aka Twitter, West Coast _Rob, as well as YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/West Coast Rob. I know I'm not up to date on there. However, the podcast, the audio versions of the podcast upload to YouTube, and I know YouTube is more video format. We're getting there, y'all. Trying to balance and trying to figure out the YouTube schedule. So my apologies for the lack of up-to-date content on YouTube, but we're going to get there. Trust and believe that. But now we're here, episode 59. How are y'all? Hope y'all had a good weekend. Hope y'all are doing well. Like I said, weekend was busy. My weekend was, yes, we're back. I had to cut it off real quick. I had somebody talking to me, a message being relayed. So here we are, episode 59. Thank y'all for tuning in. And like I said, make sure y'all follow on all social media platforms and podcast platforms. But how are y'all doing out there? I hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all had a good weekend. Hope y'all got to relax or do whatever it is you needed to do, reset from the prior week. My weekend was busy, so we have the work week, and then I roll right into a busy weekend because my daughter, my gymnast daughter, had a gymnastics meet out of state. So we had to go and we had to push down there so she could compete and do her thing. We were in Charleston, South Carolina. And for those of you who have not been to Charleston, South Carolina, I recommend it. It's one of the oldest cities in the United States, one of the first cities, and it's very, very historic, beautiful city. And we were staying the hotel. We were like right in the middle of the city center or town center, whatever you want to call them nowadays. Our hotel was right in the smack dab middle of it, so it was prime location. We got there. We left Thursday morning, and we got there Thursday evening. Checked into our room and got some dinner, and we had to be there bright and early the next day on Friday morning to the gymnastics meet, so my daughter can make the open stretch. Check-in was at 7:45. Athlete check-in, and it was packed. People all from surrounding states coming to compete. So we got there. We had to be there at 7:45 in the morning. So 6-hour drive down to Charleston. Got some dinner. Got to chill, rest a little bit, eat for an early morning drive. The drive to the meet was about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So it wasn't too far. We were right outside of Charleston. We were in a city called Mount Pleasant. Beautiful area. Beautiful area. That whole Mount Pleasant, North Charleston area, so beautiful. Yeah, my daughter, you know, kids, or people in general, when they're doing something for so long, a sport, a hobby, or whatever the case may be, I mean, you gotta find that drive or that passion within you, and you gotta keep that. You know what I mean? That passion you have when you start it, you gotta keep it as you go and you continue on for however long you're doing it. So, my daughter, she's at the point right now to where she's been doing gymnastics since she was, how old was she? 3 or 4 years old, and she's been doing it now for 10 years, gymnastics for 10 years. And I think right now she's at the point to where she told me that it's not the same, or she doesn't have that same passion for it that she did a few years ago. So she's wanting to try new things, new sports. She's very into cheer. Um, she's going into high school, so she's going to cheer for the high school. Thinking about competitive cheer, maybe, maybe not. But now she also wants to venture into volleyball. She's very interested in volleyball. So, being that parent, you I'm not teaching or saying or telling y'all how to parent or what to do as parents, but my recommendation or my little tidbit of advice is, if your kid or whatever doesn't want to do a sport or whatever, listen to them. You know what I mean? You just like you get burnt out working at the same place you work at or doing whatever it is you do, same goes for them. So she's at the point where she's not really loving gymnastics anymore. And it's a shame because she's number 8 overall in the state, and it's just not fun for her anymore. So, being that parent, being respectful and respecting her wishes and, wanting the best for her, we got to go with how she's feeling and what she's saying. So this will be her last season competing, or we'll see. You know what I mean? We'll see, because this past meet in Charleston, this past weekend, she didn't have one of her best meets. However, it was there was a lot of controversy, excuse me, behind it. For example, her best event is the floor. That's when they're bouncing around, running, doing the flips, etc. So we usually start with the floor, which I don't like because it's her best event. So it either can make or break her whole day of competition, her whole competition. So I like to save it for last. I like it if it could be last and she can knock that out, then I mean it can help boost her score. So be it. But usually the past couple meets, her floor routine has been first. Her team has always gone first. So this past meet, it ended up being the last event. So she started on vault. That's where you run, you hit the springboard, you hit the little pommel horse or whatever, you do a flip, et cetera, et cetera. So we started with that, bars, beam, floor. So she was stoked about vault. She kind of messed up on the landing. Still got a good score. She got a 9.1 or something, 9.2. And then from there, she went to bars, which she doesn't like, but she had that mentality like, oh, I hate bars. So bars, she didn't do too hot. She got an 8.9 or 8.8 or something like that. Then beam, she's pretty good on beam. She got, what'd she get? A 9 or an 8.7 or 8.8. So she wasn't too hot. So going into the floor routine, she knew that's her strong suit. So she can go in and she knows that she can go in there and do her thing, help bring her overall score up. So, I seen she was sitting as other teams are competing, they're waiting, and she was on the phone. So I texted her, and I was like, "Hey, some Lululemon action. if we after this you kill this. I was like, kill the floor. She was like, oh, I'm going to. I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. Great mentality. Let's go. So, me being that parent, every time she's whatever she's doing, I'm flinching, I'm recording, and I'm just tense. So she's doing a floor routine, murders it, murders the floor routine, kills it. Awaiting the score, 8.8. Everybody in that gym who was watching was like, what the fuck? Because you can hear people like, oh, hey, oh, wow, da da da. And she's just naturally graceful out there, powerful tumbler, flipping, just smooth, so smooth. And we've had several people at several competitions just compliment her and how she is. Like, man, she's a gymnast. She's just, man, some girls do gymnastics and some girls are gymnasts and she's a gymnast. We've had all those. And so one critique I give her is like, when you're competing, be sassy. You know what I'm saying, give that too. You know what I'm saying? Bring that swagger out there. She did all that attitude. She was all about it. Killed that floor routine. So that 8.8, we're like, what the fuck was that about? So, we've had issues with the coaching all season, last season or whatever. So we spoke to one of the coaches and he was like, I think she did one too many one too many, not tumbles. I forgot what he said, what it's called, but tumbling. It's a tumble. You're only allowed 2 tumbling passes. There it is, tumbling passes. And she did 3. And I was like, come on, man. But her head coach should have told her that, because the head coach should have looked and seen what the requirements were for each event prior to the meet, because every meet's different. So she ended up with an 8.8. Her tight homegirl, you know what I'm saying, she ended up getting a 9.4. They're in different classes. She ended up winning the 3 out of the 4 events, and then qualifying for Sunday. So this was Friday. If you qualified for Sunday, if you were top 2 in your events, you qualified for Sunday for the finals. So her homegirl qualified for Sunday. My daughter did not, due to not placing top 2 in the events or whatever. But the floor routine really bothered us because her homegirl got a 9.4. My daughter easily, as per one of the coaches, would have easily got a 9.5, 9.6. And during the award ceremony of that night, the highest score on the floor routine for her age group or level group was a 9.2. A 9.2. So that girl who got the 9.2 and the girl who came in second place was like a 9.1 something, advanced to Sunday's finals. And it was just crazy. It was just crazy. It was upsetting to see that. And I'm sorry you hear that fucking dog barking in the background. It's my dog upstairs barking. My wife's probably using a small appliance or some shit. So you hear the dog barking. If you hear the dog barking, my apologies for that shit. God damn it. It's like, shut up. Golly. But yeah, so my daughter was upset on Saturday and on Friday. So after that we went to Lululemon anyway. It was early, so we ended the meet ended around like 1ish, 1:30ish. So we had enough time for the girls to come home or come back to the rooms and change or whatever. So we went shopping. Broke some bread at Lululemon, Bath and Body Works. Yeah, you already know. Enough said. But oh my gosh, shut up, dog. My goodness. But yeah. So Saturday came, my wife and I checked out early, or we checked out of the room early, and then we pushed back another 6 hours back home. And so on the way home, we made a pit stop. So growing up, I'm born and raised in California. born and raised in California. And I had got in trouble when I was, or we were at a hard time in our lives in California. My mother, single mom, just got laid off. I was 15 and my sister was 11 or 14. I was 14 and she was 10, 15 and she was 11. And we were going through some hard times. So growing up, now my mother's Filipino. So growing up, her sister, her only sibling in the United States, at one point lived in California, but my uncle, my mother's brother-in-law, retired and he went back home to South Carolina. So my aunt and my cousins, who I grew up real close with, they all moved to South Carolina. We would talk to them. They moved to South Carolina when I was probably 7. We would talk to them a lot, but never really saw them like that unless they came and visited once every few years when they drove to California. So we were in some hard times, homeless, lightweight living in a car, bouncing house to house, staying with people. So my mom, I was a sophomore in high school. My mom asked if, since we're going through hard times, she was like, do you want to get a job or do you want to move to South Carolina, live with your aunt and your cousins and stuff? And I was like, shit, my cousins? Hell yeah. My aunt, fuck it, let's go. Let's fucking go. So we moved from California to South Carolina. Talk about a fucking culture shock. I went from big city to country ass town that at the time had one, two, three stoplights type shit. One of them little country ass towns that you don't even know about. You have to, in order to talk about the town, you got to name a more well known town and say, oh yeah, we're 20 miles from that city type shit. So I moved there like midway through my sophomore year and then ended up graduating. So I graduated from South Carolina in that little country ass town. And when I left there, I left there. It was hard when we got there too, because we moved there with the expectation that we're going to be fine and we're going to be taken care of, and family's going to be there, blah blah blah. But it was a polar opposite, and we went through some hard times there too. Brand new place on our own, and it was crazy. It was so crazy that the first night we got there, I cried because I wanted to go back home. It was terrible. It was terrible. But like I said, we went through some hard times there. We were living with my aunt and my uncle and my cousins, but it was too much because their house wasn't big enough for us, so we had to get out and do shit on our own. My mom got a job and then got laid off. We were in this little farmhouse and then moved from this farmhouse, and we lived in this country ass trailer that was owned by a man who lived across the street, and the whole block we were on was just his family, which they were good people. They were good people. Um, but yeah, so we lived in this country ass trailer, and like I said, we ran into some hard times. We had fallen out with my family, with my aunts, with my aunt, and my cousins, and my uncle, and we were on our own out there. So I was at the time sophomore. It was at my end of my sophomore year, junior year, and I got a job, and I was the sole breadwinner of the household. My mom had got laid off, and being a Filipino woman in a country ass town where it's just black and white folk, where it's an issue if a black guy is dating a white girl, vice versa. That's the type of shit we were on. I felt like we were like in olden times. So it was tough for her to get a job. We didn't have a car. When we did have a car, we couldn't afford the payment, so the car got taken back. So I was a sole breadwinner working at a KFC that I had to walk to and from work at night when I got off, and it was just it was hard times, man. Making $5.15 an hour $5.15 an hour. I wasn't even full time. I was a student. So my paychecks every 2 weeks were like $210. And that $210 had to buy groceries, pay the light bill and the rent, and it didn't do it. But anywho, it was so on the way back from Charleston. We're pretty good now. I'm saying my kids, they'll never know what it's like to struggle, because that's the whole point and the whole purpose of a parent, is to prevent your kid from ever knowing what struggling is, especially if you had to struggle or you came up struggling, et cetera, et cetera. So your kid will never, ever struggle if that's your whole mindset, which that's mine and my wife's. My wife didn't have it as difficult as I did, but she had somewhat difficult as well, upbringing as well. So I told my daughters, like, on the way up, I want y'all to see where me and your aunt lived. So as we're driving up from Charleston back home, we stopped by the little town that we lived in. And I was like, oh, so we used to live in this house right here. They had added 2-car garage to it or whatever. So we hit the corner, and went down the street, went around the corner, and there you see the trailer. So we pull up, and I see this raggedy ass trailer, still raggedy, even more raggedy than what it was when we lived in that piece. And they're like, "You live there?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I drove around the block, hit the backside, and then took a picture of the backside, showed them, like, we used to kick it on this stoop right here because we lived in the trailer, and at times we didn't have enough money for power to pay the light bill. So we went summers without power, without air conditioning and lights, and then we went winters at times without heat, lights, and power. So in the summertime, when it was hot, there was a big pecan tree in the back of it, and when the shade was covering that portion of the trailer, the back door, my mother, me, and my sister used to kick it on the back stoop back there, because we didn't want to kick it in the front. There was no porch, there was just steps, but we didn't want the people who lived across the street to see us. In the back of the trailer, it was just like, it's an old, like, rundown factory or some shit. I forgot what was back there. So we used to kick it back there in the back in the shade, the only way we can actually cool down, because we didn't have any air conditioning. So we would just sit back there in the shade and then just, spend quality time, me, my sister, and my mother, just coking and joking and just bullshitting, trying to cool off. It was still hot. We were in the shade. It was still hot, but we did what we had to do to make days pass until night came, and then that's when it was actually cooler. But we didn't have any lights, so we would light candles, and then we would sit and just talk and joke and make each other laugh until it was time to go to sleep, and then do it all over again. So I wanted my daughters to see the place where me, my sister, and my mother lived. And it's crazy because I took a picture of it and I posted it on Instagram. And I had so many people comment on the picture. They sent me, or in my DMs, they're like, "Yo, what is this? What is that?" Or, "This looks like it has a story behind it." So then I would tell them, I was like, "Yo, I used to live here." And then one of my homies was like, "Damn, you done came a long way." I was like, "Yeah, I did." And then another homie was just like, "Oh, I'm eager to hear the story." So for those of you who listen to the pod, who've seen the story or seen the post, that's the story behind the trailer that I posted on Instagram. I used to live there with no power in the summertime, just sweating our ass off, man, sweating our fucking ass off. The only thing we had to, like, really cool us down was taking the shower, because there was no heat in the summertime. So it was just ice cold water in the hot ass fucking summer in a fucking tin can that we were just in there baking. And that used to, like, just calm us down, and we could take as long as we wanted to, because we didn't have a water bill, because we couldn't afford to pay it, or our electric bill or whatever. And then in the wintertime, though, it was terrible, because that same ice cold water in the summertime was ice cold in the wintertime. and having to take a shower in the wintertime was fucking terrible. Um, we had fallen out with my aunt, like I said, and we weren't gonna ask the people across the street or like the family who lived on that whole block if we could take a shower in their fucking house because there was warm water. So we did what we had to do. You know, we had to take real quick fucking cold showers. And I guess that's like nowadays, that's why I don't mind taking cold showers, or why I do the cold shower. One, because it's beneficial to your health. Look it up. And secondly, is because I had to for a good amount of time. And when we did reconcile with my family members, there were times where we had to walk, or we walked to my aunt's house, which was probably up the block, up the street, down the block, probably good 20-25 minute walk in the winter just to take a shower with warm water or hot water. So we would shower. Me, my mom, and my sister would make the walk, go over there. We would take showers, and then we would kick it with them, and then like spend time, eat dinner or whatever. And then they would drop us back off. So that's the story behind the trailer, man. It was a time in my life and my sister's life and my mother's life that, you know, we felt pretty low, but at the same time, we didn't feel low. Actually, let me rephrase that. We didn't feel low, but it was a low point in our life. But at the same time, it was a highlight because our bond got so tight. We were just we were all we had. We had no TV. We would walk to the dollar or a family dollar to buy batteries for this little boom box that would drain the fucking batteries after like 30 minutes, 45 minutes of using the shit. So we were just in there, just sitting in there talking, laughing, joking. And they were great times though. It was a great quality time that we spent, my mother, my sister, and I, under some sad conditions and some sad circumstances, but it made us and it brought us real close. So like that's why looking back, it's just like, to me, it's like I always told myself I would never go back there, never go back there. But I don't know. I was eager and I was lightweight excited to take my daughters back and to go back to see how it was, and that's what I did. And when I did it, so when I looped back around on the backside, there was a car across the street in the driveway, and I saw a person in it, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I know who that person is." So I looped back around, and it was one of who I call my cool aunts. She was one of the family members of the people. Like I said, a whole family lived on that block. There was one, two, three houses on one side, the trailer, and then two houses down next to the trailer. And all those houses were family members. It was the mother and the father, then it was the brother, and then it was cousins. Across the street was one of the sons, and then another cousin. So I ended up looping back around. It ended up being one of the daughters. And I pulled up and I was like, hey, her name is Sue. I was like, Sue. I was like, you remember me? And she was looking in. She's like, and I said my name. She's like, holy shit. Oh my God, but I was just talking about you a little while ago. Talking about, I wonder where he is. I wonder where he is. I wonder where his sister is, whatever, whatever. So now that these people are older, they're older. And she was saying that and she was crying. She's like, oh my God. So I hopped out, gave her a hug, and she's calling people on the phone. She called her niece who lived in the house next to the trailer to come out and was like, yo, who is this? Just peep your head out the door to see who it is. And then she did, or she came outside and she's like, oh, and she said my name right off rip. And she's like, I know that face. I know the face. So then they were calling people. I was talking on the phone with people. They were taking pictures of me, sending pictures to their other family members, not believing that I was there. So it was good. It was a good experience, man. Yeah, it was a good experience, man. I wouldn't say nostalgic, but it was just like, you know, going through that and going through such a hard time. There was times where we would just be outside on one of their front porches and just sitting there on some old country shit. Just a bunch of people would just pull up and we would just sit on the porch, coking and joking bullshit. And I was in high school too with these adults, and it was just some country shit, man. But it was good times. They were happy to see me there. Like I said, they were crying. They took my number down and they were just excited. They met my family. So it was a all in all good experience from one to show my daughters what or the type of home I had to live in or what I had to deal with, and meeting the people who helped with getting through living in that type of condition. And, you know, it was just a good experience all in all. We left there and then got home, and then yesterday I just kicked it, chilled, relaxed, and you know, didn't go back to work. I took off until Tuesday. So don't go back till Tuesday, or didn't go back till Tuesday, depending on when you listen to this. But yeah, made sure I had some ample time to recoup, recharge, and that's how it was. You know, I had to get my podcast and let y'all know, keep y'all updated on how my weekend went down, man. So it's all in all good experience, good weekend. But yeah, that's it, man. That's it for my weekend and for the episode. You know what I mean? Shorter episode, but I'm trying to get guests on here. That's another thing. People aren't wanting to appear on podcasts anymore. On the podcast, you know what I mean? I've been doing this for 3 years. Motherfuckers, I would hit them up or inquiring about guests, and people were for it. I don't know what it is nowadays. People are not wanting to appear. So don't worry though. I'm gonna have some guests on here, and I don't mean like people who are like co-hosts, like my boy Vern, or like my daughters. Those are co-hosts. I mean guests like people who are inquiring or informing us or educating us on whatever it is they're due in that genre. Those type of guests. I've been blowing people up, blowing them up, but they haven't been getting back to me, or they're saying nah. So it's all good though. We're going to get some interesting guests. Trust me. But with that being said, we're going to wrap it up here, y'all. Episode 59. Thank y'all for listening. Make sure y'all rate the podcast 5 stars. Leave comments, share, follow, subscribe, the whole 9. Follow on Instagram at YeahDat Podcast. Follow on TikTok at YeahDat Podcast. Did I say follow on Instagram at YeahDat Podcast? If I did, follow on Instagram at YeahDat Podcast. Follow on TikTok at YeahDat Podcast. And make sure you follow on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. YouTube.com/West Coast Rob. And you'll see shorts, clips, full episodes. You'll get the audio versions of the podcast. There's a couple of vlogs down there too. I'm gonna be doing some more vlogs. I'm gonna get back on my YouTube shit. Trust me. But till then, thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for listening. I appreciate y'all so much for the support. Make sure y'all put y'all homies on. Tell them to fucking follow. You know what I'm saying? But thank y'all for listening. I appreciate y'all so much. And until the next episode, it'll be episode 60. We're going to try to get a guest. You know what I'm saying? We're going to try to get a guest on this next one. But episode 59, it's the homie West Coast Rob signing out. Until the next episode, YeahDat.